Good afternoon. I'm really glad I can share with you on this rainy day. I want to start off. I want to talk about a story, kind of about myself. But I've like to think that I've followed the Lord my whole life. I was born here. I've spent many years in this church my entire life, and I've kind of seen a roller coaster of a walk with Christ over my life. And I'm not super proud of that, especially when it goes down, but I think it's good to be honest, and I think it can be a really good teaching point today. Like I said, I was born here. I grew up here. I was baptized at a younger age. I think I was 12. I was 12 or 13. I was on fire for God my entire childhood, all the way up through, I would say, towards almost the end of my high school career. I would invite my friends to church. I would, tell them about God. It was all about Jesus. Everything I did was about Jesus. And I'm really proud of that. I thought I did well then. I got towards the end of high school though. My friends kind of started taking a different route, and I'm not going to say that I completely quit or I completely forgot about Jesus. I was always here. I was always reading my Bible. I was always doing the best I can. But from time to time, I found myself caught up in other things or focusing on other things more that I shouldn't have been focusing on. And, thank God that, I went to college, and I really tried hard to get back in the church and focus on it. And then this job opened up, and, it was kind of like the Lord had it all planned out for me. And I think I've done the best I can and been on fire for God ever since. So kind of got a little roller coaster action here. There's highs and lows, and I think it's important for us to realize that and look at that, because I can teach about that today. And let's look at that. I want to talk about some biblical characters that we kind of put it up in a high pedestal, and we say, wow, they were awesome, or they were always doing the right things. But that's not always the case. None of us are perfect. We all have our lows at some point. And I kind of want to start with Solomon today, King Solomon. We look at King Solomon, we say, well, he was the wisest man ever. He wrote the Psalms and the Proverbs, some of the Psalms and a lot of the Proverbs. And we say that, he's a man of God and he's awesome. We revere him. But what we don't always talk about is the fact that Solomon had a severe woman problem to the point where he actually turned his back on God. And I want to read that for us today. We're going to read 1 Kings 11, 1 through 13. I'll read that for us right now. This is titled Solomon's Wives. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter: Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, Hittites. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, you must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods. Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. That's a lot of women. I don't know how he kept up with all of them. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his hearts after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord, his God, as the heart of David, his father, had been. He followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonites, and Molech the detestable, the god of the Ammonites. So Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not follow the Lord completely as his father David had done. On a hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab, and for Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. He did the same for all his foreign wives, who burned incense and offered sacrifices to their gods. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had been turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's commands. So the Lord said to Solomon, since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees which I have commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. This is a really sad story. Solomon was an awesome man. he followed God wholeheartedly. He loved the Lord. He rebuilt the temple. He did all sorts of things, brought prosperity to Israel. But Solomon got caught up in women. Solomon found himself chasing women and loving women more than he loved God. He did whatever they said, whatever they want him to do. They wanted to worship their gods, so Solomon was like, hey, I'll do it with them. As far as actually building altars to them, which is terrible. Solomon swayed from his commitment from God and God alone, and as a result, he was punished. We read there towards the end, God tells him, I'm going to tear the kingdom away from you just because of how awful you've been. And he had mercy because of David, his father, obviously, but, Solomon really messed up here. And the sad thing about Solomon is we don't really know if he got it figured out. Later on, in some of his readings, we read that, he says, everything is meaningless except for worshiping God. So I hope he got it figured out, but at the end of the day, I don't really know. And that's a really sad thing. So Solomon is a good example of how we can get caught up in everything around us and forget what's really important. Let's look at a time that Peter forgot about what was really important. Whenever we think about Peter, we think about, he was one of the original disciples. He was there with Jesus through it all, and he was an integral part to the early church. Let me set the stage here for you. We're going to read Matthew 14:22 through 33. Here, Jesus had just fed the 5,000. As we talked about the other day, it might have been a lot more than that, but Jesus had just fed the 5,000, and that's where we'll pick up right now. So like I said, this is Matthew 14:22. It says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up to the mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone. And the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, hit by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. Let me read that again. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. They said, it's a ghost, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. First off, I've got to give props to Peter here, okay? Jesus comes walking out on the water in a storm, and he looks at Peter and he says, come to me. And Peter gets out of the boat and walks on the water towards Jesus. Peter had some guts, because I can't say that I would do that. I don't know what I would have done. But Peter literally got out of the boat and did what Jesus said. He started to do the right thing. But the problem here is that Peter started taking his eyes off the Lord. Instead of looking at Jesus and focusing on him, Peter started looking around at what was going on all around him, and he forgot about what was right in front of him and what was really important. And that's why he started to sink. Peter was going to drown. Peter was sinking in the water. He was out in the middle of a storm. Everything was crazy. It was violent. The waves were hitting, and it was storming, raining hard. And Peter began to sink and cried out to Jesus to save him. Peter realized what he'd done wrong. How often are we like Solomon and Peter? I know I am. I know that girls catch my eyes like Solomon. I know that I forget to look at what's important like Peter did and focus on all these crazy things that happen in this life. I know I'm just like both of them. But really what we need to do is we need to learn from them before it's too late. We need to be able to catch ourselves. And, if you're like anybody, you're going to say, well, Andrew, I know that, but how do I do that? And I think that as long as we are doing things for the Lord, if we're praying and we're constantly reading our Bible and constantly surrounding ourselves with the thought of Jesus and looking up, that we won't fall. And I think something else that's really important to me in particular is to surround myself with good people. If I have good people around me that are watching me and know what I stand for, they're going to say, Andrew, you're not being yourself. You're not doing what you normally do. These are ways that we can catch ourselves and we can understand, I'm starting to sway. I'm starting to go down on that roller coaster. And that's not what we want. We want to stay hot for God all the time. To kind of give you something as I wrap up here, I want you to think about this. Whenever I think about these things, I can't help but think about Casting Crowns. They had a song. They came out with an album a couple years back. It was called "Jesus, Friend of Sinners," and in the song, one of the verses always sticks out to me. It says, "Always looking around, but never looking up. I'm so double-minded." That hits on a different level with me, because I'm telling you, so often I get so caught up in what is going around. I look around so often that I forget to look up and remember what's really important. And I think that's something that we all need to work on, and we all need to take away from that. It's absolutely crucial to not get caught up in all the crazy things of life, especially right now with this crazy pandemic going on. And like the verse says, instead of always looking around, be sure that we're looking up. Until next time, God bless.